about bug and box. However, the community has a lot of concerns about this, and we have a lot of questions, and some that I have gathered from others. One is, how many ice cream shops do we need in one town? How many donut shops do we need in one town? How many more drive-through minimum wage paying places do we need in one town? When will we get another sit-down restaurant, a quality store, maybe a hardware store, something that can benefit the people that are living here? We do not need another donut shop. Gas station up the road is vacant property from a truck stop that is contaminated that no one wants. What are we going to do with that? It just sits there and looks horrible. How many has Myers gas station been approved? Does anyone know?
Yes.
It has been approved? So we're going to have 4 gas stations in this little span.
We just generally don't get in conversation. That was a quick yes.
How many gas stations do we need in one town? I personally won't buy gas here. It's too darn expensive. I drive all the way to Costco. There's so many questions.
Me too, by the way.
That doesn't make any sense. We can't have a Menards. We can't have other things here, but we can have another 14 gas pumps that are contaminating our ground. What are we going to do when one of these gas stations goes under? We have a drive-through town here. People come off the highway, they get their fast food, which we have one of each fast food restaurant, by the way, and another one building up the road. How many fast food restaurants does one stretch of town need? It's ridiculous. There's no quality here. There's no good paying jobs here. We live here. That's it. We have to travel everywhere else for everything else.
Well, and I just want to say my concern is really the traffic. And when I was here at the meeting on the 16th, MDOT said that they, in their study of January of this year, that they won't put a traffic light, or they don't feel that their one is needed. Now, we live on Blaine, so we drive north to the light, to 59. And I'm going to tell you, the one driveway coming out of Walmart, people tend to stop there, so I can keep heading north. The one closest to the Burger King, they just whip right out in front of you. And likewise with the driveway that comes out of Burger King, whip right in front of us. And technically, I mean, I could be going 45 miles an hour on that stretch. And that is my concern at Clark Road at M59. It's going to just be a horrible mess, traffic-wise.
Look at how many signs that have needed to be put in front of Myers for no U-turn. This whole stretch of traffic area down 59 here through downtown, where whatever commercialized Hartland is horrible. I have to come out of Blaine and go a quarter mile out of my way to go that way. Every day, more than once. There's nothing that can be done about that, but I'm questioning where the thoughts of the Planning Commission come from when they want to put another 14 pumps in, another donut shop, another ice cream place. For what? What positive can that possibly bring to this stretch of work? That's all.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? All righty, seeing none, we'll close call to the public, and we'll move to item 7A, which is our public hearing for this evening, and give you a brief rundown for those of you that have not been here for a public hearing. In a moment, we'll open the public hearing. What we will do is turn the floor over to our planning director, who will review the project that we're discussing this evening, which is the softball complex. He'll get done. We'll invite the applicant to come up the table. They'll do a presentation, any thoughts that they want to add to it. They will return back to their seats in the audience, and then you'll be invited to come up, much like a call to the public. Just come forward, give us your name, where you live, and any comments you'd like to make. We won't interact at that point. We'll be writing your questions down, and later as the meeting moves on, we'll get those answered for you. So what I'd like to do is open the public hearing at 7:33 for the applicant, Turn-In-2 Softball Complex, parcel ID numbers 4708-22-200-003, -004, -006, and 007. The applicant is requesting approval for construction of a youth softball complex that will consist of 4 illuminated outdoor softball fields and accessory facilities. And just for the record, all the public notice requirements for this public hearing have been met. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to our planning director, David Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Good evening, everyone in the audience this evening. As Chair Fox mentioned, what is proposed this evening is a private recreation area on a combined 95 acres on the southwest corner of Clyde and Old US 23. And when I say combined 95 acres, it's comprised of 4 properties that the applicant has purchased and presumably will combine if and when the approvals for his proposal have been acquired. The proposal is for as the chair mentions, 4 illuminated softball fields, along with a approximately 60,000 square foot indoor training facility. And within that indoor training facility are going to be uses very compatible with the softball fields, including 2 indoor practice fields, multiple indoor batting cages, locker rooms, offices, a small retail component that's going to sell softball equipment, batting gloves, and all that good stuff. There are also showing a surface parking lot to service this facility. They're showing the possibility of future expansion, including a possibility of a future baseball diamond that's not being proposed at this time, but there is an area identified for future expansion. Procedurally, this plan is considered a special land use. The property in question is Zone CA, Conservation Agriculture, and per the Hartland Township zoning ordinance, a private recreation area on a property Zone CA is considered a special land use. What that means is that procedurally the plan has to come before this planning commission for a recommendation of approval, and then the Hartland Township Board would have the option for final approval. So it's a 2-step process. The applicant has submitted a full site plan submittal, and the planning department has done a thorough review. So too has the township engineer, the Hartland Deerfield Fire Marshal, and the township's Department of Public Works. All of those review letters have been provided in the planning commission's packet, and we're also available on the township's website. The planning department's review letter is dated July 23rd, 2015. And in that letter, the planning department goes through a number of the issues that I'm sure a lot of the folks who are here this evening and their neighbors are concerned about. Primarily, we've spent a lot of time speaking to the lighting issues, the potential noise issues, and the screening and buffering around the proposed facility. And we will get into all those issues in detail as part of the discussion this evening. The planning commission, or excuse me, the planning department in our review letter of July 23rd did not offer a formal recommendation. We feel that there's enough loose ends on this project and enough unanswered questions that we hope to make some progress on this evening, that our recommendation is this planning commission not take any formal action this evening, not make any formal recommendation to the township board. Give the applicant an opportunity to have a discussion with the planning commission, have an opportunity to hear any public comments, and possibly make the necessary revisions to their plans and bring it back to this planning commission at a later date to hopefully address all the issues that we hope to have a good discussion about here tonight. Because this is a public hearing, a lot of folks in the audience likely got one of the planning department's letter in their mailboxes. We are required to send one to every property owner within 300 feet adjacent to these 4 properties. We're also required to put a notice in the Livingston Press and Argus that was published 15 days prior to this evening, back on July 15th. So I know the Planning Commission typically wants me to keep my overview at this stage relatively brief, give the applicants an opportunity to come forward and go through their presentation, and I'm happy to do that. And then typically once we get through the applicant's overview and once we get through the public comment, then the Planning Commission will likely go through my department's review letter and the review letters of our other reviewing agencies in more detail. So if it's the desire of the Planning Commission, I'll stop there, see if there's any questions before they have an opportunity to invite the applicant forward.
I would say it's your turn. If you'd like to come up, introduce yourself, and give us and the public here and at home an opportunity to hear what you want to do.
All right, I guess I'll start. I'm Kevin Johnson with Rhodes & Johnson, 101 North Ally, Fenton, Michigan, 48430. So we're here tonight to discuss the Turn-Into softball complex. I'm representing David Kennedy, who is with his daughter at the Softball Nationals in South Carolina. So he's not here tonight, so I'm going to do my best to answer all the questions that I can. He lives in Brighton. His daughter goes to school here in Brighton, and he wants to build an indoor training facility in Michigan so that his daughter can train in the rest of his team and other teams. As you know, we have bad weather here in this area, and so from the fall, like October through, say, May, most kids in Michigan are at a disadvantage to other southerly states. So he'd like to use his own money privately to build an indoor complex in a community he lives. And for the Planning Commission members that we've talked about, his intent is not to build a inexpensive. He is planning to build the same turf that's at the University of Michigan, to have first-class fields, to have a first-class indoor training facility in the community that he stays, works, and lives in. I live in the area. My family lives down Old 23. I work in Fenton. So what we bring tonight is a representation of what we believe. We spent a lot of time in trying to be both good neighbors, have a low-intensity use and a good piece of property, but still have access to the freeway for young girls to come and play. I'm a little sentimental. I have an 18-year-old daughter, so anytime the girls can come and play, that'd be good by me. So with me tonight is John Aslan, the architect. We can talk to him about the plans. Doug with Row Engineering, and so we'd like to go through the plans. Maybe we could show the audience the three renderings and then work a little more details. That'd be okay.
That'd be fine. So if and when the time comes, I can switch the technology so that what you're seeing on your screen is, if your team could you, move the microphone a little bit closer, and depending on who's talking, just, we are recording and
Fine. So
want to make sure we have good audio.
I'll turn the renderings around so the audience can see, and then John can put them up on the visual to show everybody.
Sure. That'd be great.
John Aslan from Aslan McLean Architectural Group, 4488 West Bristol Road, Flint, Michigan. I've got on the screen, up on the screen, you can see this is a view of what would be the training facility, looking pretty much northwesterly. You can see we've adhered to the strict requirements of the Hartland Township Ordinance relative to materials and material percentages. There are some waivers that we're requesting that have pretty much to do with how the building scales and how actually the materials come to play against one another. They're pretty minor variances, but they're detailed in the packet which we turned in. So this is an exterior view. Let's see, I'll go to this is an interior view of the practice facility, where you can see the way the building is designed. There's a set. Well, I'll get to it when I get to the plan. There's a center core, and then there's two practice fields that flank the center core. So this is a view of one of the practice fields with the batting cages in the background, the entry view over here, restrooms, the retail area here, and then storage at the rear. And then I'll give you an overview here of the entire site. This puts the site in perspective with the expressway, Clyde Road, and how Old 23 goes across there. Okay? Next, let me go to the building plans. This is an overall floor plan showing the building, which is roughly 420 feet by 150 feet. Each end, as I indicated, contains a portion of a softball field for practice. There are 10 batting cages in the center. The main entry, which faces south, has the retail area with some offices. This area is also supposed to be mezzanine for a gathering room upstairs, where after practice the teams can gather. This portion of the building is used for storage, to store equipment for these softball fields as well as the exterior softball fields. Let's see. Here's the elevations. One of the things I will touch on is the ordinance as it related to the articulation of the roof. The ordinance requires that the roof articulate every 100 feet, which would mean in this particular building, we'd have to raise and lower our roof once every 100 feet. As our building functions, these two larger spaces on the end are actually where the practice softball fields are. We felt that with the design thing that we brought in, the horizontal elements composed, also the vertical elements, this particular facility actually is quite pleasing to the eye. And these are just some interior shots. I think the perspective showed it better. We've indicated the material percentages. Pretty much, as I indicated, our presentation and proposal, our submittal was very exhaustive and we thought very to the point. Also on the site, we'd have a concession stand. This is a relatively small building in the middle of the softball fields where concessions can be sold, as well as a large restroom facility for the girls and the boys also. And then each of the fields will have 2 dugouts. And each of these dugouts match the concession stand as well as the training facility in terms of materials and proportions. If you have any questions relative to the building, I'm going to answer them.
I think what we'll do is have you go through your complete proposal, and then we'll send you guys back, and then we'll bring you back up for all that good stuff when we get the public's input.
Pull up the site plan.
It's coming, here it comes.
Doug Scott, Road Professional Services Company, 540 South Saginaw, Flint, Michigan. Project manager for the site development as far as the civil side of it. Basically, just to give you an overview of it, and I know you've all seen it and everything on that. As we mentioned, the boulevard entrance off of Old 23 there, coming in, nicely landscaped. We have a flagpole and stuff out there. 3 flagpoles, I guess, actually, is what we have. Coming in with the asphalt parking lot. There's 248 spaces proposed on that. Curb and gutter all the way around, and perimeter, storm sewer drainage, all the way through that, and basically, again, landscaping goes all the way around both the perimeter and in accordance with your ordinance requirements through there as well. And then basically to the south, there's the four softball diamonds, and as John's mentioned, basically with the concession stand, and there's some planters in the middle and stuff, again, trying to create a nice usable landscape facade through there. The building will be served with Type 2 well for water, and then a raised septic field. We're showing it down in that area. We haven't done the perk test and stuff yet to confirm that's exactly where it's going to go, but we're working on that as well. And then basically all the stormwater will be detained and then distributed into the detention pond there. We have the first flush basin, and then basically down at the bottom, or down the southern end, just before the tree lines, and then that discharges into the creek there. And all of that will be in accordance with the Livingston County drain requirements and stuff on that too. As we mentioned, the fields, they're looking at full AstroTurf. Basically the same materials that U of M is using on theirs. And again, so all that surface water and everything that goes through that will be filtered into the detention pond. So I think that's pretty much it. Overview.
All right. If that's what you've got for us now, which is great, that gave us and the audience a idea of what you're proposing. If you guys want to return to your seats, And then what we're going to do, once you're there, we're going to ask anybody in the audience that would like to come forward, just like we did at Call to the Public, if you could, come on up one at a time, give us your name, address, give us your questions, your comments, whatever they are. We'll write them down, and then when we're done with the Call to the Public, we'll close the public hearing. We'll invite the applicant back, and we'll go through your questions along with a site plan review. So at this point in time, if anybody in the audience would like to make any statements, now is it. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Travis Walk. This is my wife, Denise Urban. If you look up at the map right there to the left, that's our house and our property that borders the facility. And I guess a couple of things from hearing the earlier comments about the gas station and sitting here and realizing that maybe things don't always go according to plan. And, I'm just wondering, I want to make sure that all of the ordinances that are put in place are strictly adhered to, meaning barriers. I see that they're trying to take use of existing foliage that's there, and it doesn't seem like that would really be up to code, because those are deciduous trees which in the wintertime drop their leaves, and you can completely see everything that's from our house down to the stop sign. The other things, flipping through some of the plans that we've seen, are the lighting structures, and I know that you guys haven't approved anything, and you're still looking for feedback and to see what that element is, so I'd be curious to hear about that. What was there? Sound. Looks like there's no PA system that's going to be put in there.
I'll cover that, but yeah.
Okay. But just, I guess, the sound, and really looking to see what the requirements are for the sound and the lighting, because that's obviously a big concern for us as we sit out on our deck and look out. That field faces directly our property. It's right there. And so I can imagine, 10 o'clock at night on a summer evening or early fall, enjoying a glass of wine and the lights flipping on, and that's not really why we moved there. And I'm not against this project. It's just I want to be clear and make sure that that what's being presented is adhered to. And I'm curious too, if things come through and they're approved in a certain manner, and maybe there's a special use for the lights. Maybe it's lights are off at 9 o'clock, whatever it is, which I'm not even sure why we need lights if it's for youth anyway. Well, they should be up playing at 10 o'clock at night, but if it is, and if it passes through and the ordinance is 10 o'clock and it's 10:15 and the lights are on, what's the penalty? Is it a $50 fine? Big deal. So I'd be curious to see what sort of restrictions are in place for anything that isn't adhered to that's presented in the plan and approved through the commission and through the board. Oh, and also any future proposals. I haven't had a chance to read through all of the documents, but the land that is directly to the south, to the west of the diamonds there, any sort of future proposals, I don't want a gas station there either. But I mean, there's a lot of wildlife. There's right, maybe a walking path out there for all the people who come to the tournaments to enjoy, because there are a lot of deer out there. There's coyote out there. There's all sorts of things that are going to be displaced, which might be a concern for some of the other neighbors. I'm not sure. Those are just some of the concerns that we have off the top of our head, and we're looking forward to hearing some feedback. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, good evening. Doug Fairbanks at 4651 Fleck Drive. I echo much of their concern. I certainly can think of a lot worse things to go in this area. However, do have concerns about light. Even back where I am, and I'm back towards the marsh more. in the winter, I can see the light from the gas station sign at Clyde and 23. So not just ball field lights, but I could certainly see, depending on how the lights are designed for the parking lot. I don't know if there's need to have it fully lit all of the time, all through the night, or how the lighting works, or what ordinances are with regard to lighting for the parking lots as well. The sound also, and not, obviously PA systems and so forth are of a concern, but also there is a lot of vegetation that's going to be removed in putting this facility in, and there's a lot of noise from the freeway. I can hear the freeway very clearly from my house, and I could see having this facility come in and sort of hearing the ball game going in the background, but a lot more traffic noise. So I would love to see in good neighborly conduct or whatever's required, but something to help block the noise, not just of the facility, but of the freeway too, to the homes that are behind it that might be able to hear more as a result of those trees being gone. Certainly, too, one of the things that I think we all enjoy, we talked about the animals, and there is everything back there from, we have sandhill cranes, blue heron, coyote, wild turkey, deer. There are a ton of animals that come through, and the more that we can do that to not disrupt their ability to travel through that area, and it feels like a good, well-balanced ecosystem at this point. And it's nice to be able to see a wide variety of animals, even hawks and owls too. And I am pleased to hear about the artificial turf that they plan to use. My assumption is that would mean less mowing, less noise with regard to keeping up the property, as well as less pesticide, herbicide, so forth application, as there are a lot of wetlands on the property, and hopefully then less would feed into the creek that runs through there. I'm not a civil engineer. I don't know how a detention pond works, if it just filters things before it gets out or if it just holds it and lets it evaporate. I would be curious as to how the detention pond works, if it's going to end up in the environment, if it's something that kind of holds things, it evaporates, and every now and then you clean it and it's lined with something. I just don't know. So I guess those would be my concerns, primarily light and sound, and not all of it from the facility, some of it from the clearing of the land. But I certainly can think of a lot worse things, but I think if everybody is good neighbors, I can see why, if we all just take into account each other, that it could be done very well and very nicely.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Connie Robinson, and I live at 9422 Clyde Road. This, on the first glance, looks like it may be a nice addition to the community, but I'm going to echo a couple of the concerns of some of my neighbors. The main two, for me, we're half mile west of 23, and with everything intact and undisturbed, we can hear expressway noise occasionally. Often, let's put it that way. Often. I mean, it's a background, or half a mile west, so I mean, it's not thunderous, but you can hear it. So that would be my major concern, is the noise, and hopefully barriers would be created that would help to remedy that situation. And then the other thing also is the lighting situation. How that's going to work, how late the lights are going to be on, and that's really basically my two major concerns.
All right. Well, thank you. Hello.
Good evening. My name is Jim Carr. I live in 9690 Clyde Road, neighbor to Travis Denise, just to the west. Echoing a lot of the same things, but more specifically on the light. Proposing lights on a softball fields for 10 to 18-year-olds. My question is the need for lights at all. Taking a look around the area, Weingarten Field, 3 softball fields, Spranger, the 2 at Oar Creek, Farms 3 fields, the old high school softball field, and current high school softball and baseball fields. None of these have lights. The only lights are for some of the other fields, and they look to be the same as proposed for these, and they do shed out quite a ways. From my place, I can see the glow of the football games going on. So to see that they won't go too far, I kind of question that, since I can see the glow of the football lights on a Friday night. That's the biggest thing. And then the other was on the NIAs for tournament. Any hiccup on US 23 puts every car on old 23. And I think they'll be handle it on tournament days are tough. Don't get me wrong. I've coached sports for many years. My son still plays. My daughter played for quite a few years. So I understand the tournament side of things. It tends to put a lot more cars than they ever think possible in squeezing them into parking spots. My concern would be if traffic studies were done on Old 23 to be able to handle that, given that what happens if anything goes wrong on 23. I don't mind the idea. It's just the extra stuff on how late they might go. All the tournaments that I've been part of, my son's played soccer and lacrosse. Don't go anywhere late enough that you need lights. So that would be my biggest concern. And then everything else echoes what my other two neighbors have said.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
My name's Gary Whiteman. My wife Marcy. We're neighbors to the other 2 families. We're at 9648 Clyde. I sent actually a rather, I thought, extensive letter to Mr. Campbell. I guess I just want to make sure that all of my concerns are a part of that same package, not just because I'm not up here talking about them. Again, to me, the sound, critical, the lights, but if anybody lives on Clyde Road or Old 23 and tries to go through a courtesy stop sign, you know what kind of a nightmare we have. And I've read the little report about the traffic, but I can guarantee you, if you've got a parking lot of 286 people, even if you take half of that, how are you going to flow traffic on Old 23 at a courtesy stop? And that's both directions, whether you go Clyde or whether you go down to Krause. That's ridiculous. We'll be backed up on Sunday mornings like crazy. So that's something I don't think that was stressed enough. Well, security, to me, is still something that's up in the air. Let's be honest, these are 10 to 18-year-old kids. Some of them will be driving themselves. I was an 18-year-old at one time, too. So security, to me, is a question to keep in mind. Thanks.
All righty. And I do have your letter, and come on up, and please do have a seat. I'm just going to go ahead and real quickly here, I was going to grab them at the end, but we'll do now. We did receive several letters, and I want to make sure that they are recorded in the minutes, and we have a letter from Mr. Whiteman on Clyde Road. Yep, and we have a letter from Mr. Robert Russell on Brookside Road. We have a letter from Kenan Marcella, K-A-N-G-L-Z maybe, on Townley Road. We have the letters themselves. And then we also have a letter here from, could you hand me a fourth one here just before
Mr. Barr?
Mr. Barr. Okay, from Mr. Barr. And he is on Clyde Road also. So just wanted to make sure we got those in. Now back to you.
All right. Don and Julie Arnold, 4750 Brookside. Echoing a lot. Traffic concerns, light concerns, sound concerns, displaced wildlife. And I'm going to expand a little bit. The sound absorption, they're obviously going to have to tear out a lot of the current vegetation. That's going to increase sound projection from 23 as well as the fields. Is there a way or a plan to replace some of that vegetation for more sound absorption to replace what's being ripped out? The bushes and trees that are there are pretty small, so I think that's something that's pretty feasible to do. The the verbiage of what and who will use the facility was something that I thought was interesting in the letter. They said I don't know, it didn't seem like it was very clear exactly who was going to be using the facility as well as the fields. That didn't seem to be very clear. The lights and obviously you're going to, today's technology for broadcasting lights down I think is better than it was in the previous years, but on a nice, warm, muggy night, you're not going to get rid of the glow, so it's a concern. And again, I echo, this is supposed to be strictly for children. Why would they be playing at 10? It doesn't make sense to me, but okay. And then the last one is future land use. I know it's slated for this whole property and lot is supposed to be slated as industrial. This is a special use for agricultural, which it currently is zoned at. I'm worried about, because he's not developing the whole lot, can the whole lot be kept at an agricultural status down the road? That way it kind of helps us keep what's there in terms of the wildlife and such, maybe to be developed into the other zoning, state zoning that you guys have for the other smaller plot that's on the other side of the south side of the ball fields there. Just something to consider as a possibility for future. I got the future.
Did you get it?
Wrong. It's a nice facility. I echo the same thing. It could be a lot of different things. He's took some time to develop something that looks nice. Hope you guys are following the regulations that are in place to keep it on track.
All right. Well, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies. My name is Kevin Shaw. I'm at 4633 Fleck Drive. My property abuts right on the back end of this. I have many questions, many questions for this property. Number one is progress. I mean, this is Hartland. I've lived here for 15 years. I knew this day would come. I was hoping a little bit later, but it came. So we have to deal with it. And other people said a lot worse can go in there. So I'm very happy about this proposal. There are a few questions that my neighbors have brought up. Number one is future use. I would like to have some sort of document or something that says, hey, this is what it's used for. Obviously, I want this to be successful, but if it's not successful, then the owner's going to say, okay, what can I do to get some money? I'm not in favor of next door putting a bank or a gas station, something to keep the money going. I would like it to remain. I think it's zoned as CA, is that correct? And if would it stay that way? Could you have the option of putting in a special land use to put in a bank or whatever? So that's something I would like to have some sort of protection in there for future use if something does go wrong. The other aspect is traffic. And I understand DOC did not require a study for this. Was that correct? DOT, I'm sorry? Anybody in that area that lives there knows that the traffic can get backed up any time of the day. And I think a lot of people are not thinking about this, is that most of these tournaments are being held in the fall. Well, we have a wonderful business on the other side called Spicer's. And in the fall time, on Saturday and Sunday, every neighbor can tell you that stop sign is backed up for a long time. And when people come to Hartland, I want them to have an enjoyable time. I want people to come out and say, hey, this is a great place to live. They're not going to be very happy sitting in that parking lot for an hour or so. And then most people that are coming into there are going to figure out, well, let's go south on Old 23. So that's going to back up Kraus Road, which is a stop sign there too. So I would urge you to really look carefully at that, especially in the fall, because everybody who lives in that area, and if you've been to Spicer's on a Saturday, even on a Friday, it is, and especially on Sunday, it is packed. you're going to have a large volume of traffic coming to that place when people are trying to get out of there for their Friday or Saturday or Sunday tournament. It's going to be chaotic. It's not going to be pretty at that site. The traffic, I understand, you're going to only have one way in and one way out. Is that correct? On Old 23?
We'll go through that in the plan.
Okay. Is that what's proposed?
There's one road in.
Okay. I would, again, I mean, to have one person in, and I don't know this or not, can they both go, coming out of there, are they able to go north and south on Old 23?
We'll get you that answer. We try and keep it moving. Believe me, this system works.
No,
You'll get your answer.
My main, and those are my main concerns about that. My other concern is been playing ball my whole life, been involved with baseball, gone to these tournaments. Kids wander. Kids see, if you have a team coming up from the city, Westland, wherever, they come out here to see these woods. If I'm a little kid, I'm gone. I'm in those woods just hunting around. I'm not particularly fond about looking out my back door and seeing kids walking through my marsh. Hopefully that won't happen, but if that does happen, I'm not going to be really excited about that. Is there something brought up where there's some sort of retention to keep those people out of those woods? And obviously they don't know where my property is or where that property ends. They don't have anything like that. And that's one thing I could probably get away with deferring later on to see if that problem does arise. I'm not sitting here saying I want something done right now, but I want the board to be aware of if that situation does happen, what can we do about that? Is there anything we can do about that to keep people off our properties? More than likely, they're not going to come on my property because my property is all the way in the back. For the other people that are on Clyde Road or Townley Road, it's very accessible to their property. I would really suggest, in my opinion, being there for 15 years, that traffic study, I think, is going to be very useful if they can do that. But my main concern is that traffic, especially on the weekends, especially in the fall. I'm not going to be able to get out. I'm not going to be able to get out at all. It's going to be very, very rough, especially with Spicer's getting their winery, and there's just going to be more people there. And that on the weekends, it's already crowded. It's already crowded. If you guys have been there on the weekends there, you see how crowded it is. With this tournament going on during the fall, it's going to just get really, really bad. The other concern is what everybody else is the lighting. Looking at the height of the poles, the amount of poles on each field, the amount of lights on each pole, that has to be all looked at, I guess, to see. And those lights, they illuminate. They illuminate very, very, an awful lot. And it's very difficult for me sitting here on my deck, and I'm like other people. I can see the mobile gas station, during the fall. I can see that clear as day. And with those lights, it can come right into my windows, into my living room very easily during the fall when all the leaves are off. The other question I have is towards the retention pond. I don't know, obviously, how far away is that retention pond from that creek that runs through there. And again, I'm like other people. I don't know much about retention ponds. Is there any possibility that retention pond can leak into that creek? That creek goes through my property, so I would hate to have that happen, of some contamination, and watch my marsh disintegrate down to nothing. I don't know what's protected of that. And lastly, the only thing I have is the use also on the baseball field. You might want to look at that. I don't know the dimensions. I don't have them in front of me. But if you get some people that know how to play baseball, it looks like to me they can hit home runs on Old 23. So you might want to consider looking at the possibility of putting a higher fence up there so those balls don't go on there, because, again, I don't know what the distance is, but looking at it, it may not be an issue, but it's something to look at. Obviously, the planning director would have looked at that, and that may not be an issue. But those are my issues I wish you guys would look at and see what you can do about that. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I think with that, what we will do is close the public hearing at 8:13. And now what we're going to do is ask the applicant to come back up to the table. A lot of the questions you asked will probably get answered as we go through the review letter. We'll probably try and check them off as best as we can. If we miss any of them in the review letter, we'll make sure we ask them along the way. I assume the applicant has it, Dave. I know you've got your 2 letters. Planning commissioners, we've got 2 letters from Dave. We've got the letter that on page 2 starts out the special land use review, and then it continues on, and we get to page 8, and we're the site plan review. So I guess my question on the special land use review, do you have any questions or conversation points that you wanted to cover that were in that particular letter itself? I'll start where they look. I know the question came up on PA system. Any plans for one?
No outdoor PA system at all. Zero.
Can I offer a question, Mr. Chair?
You certainly may.
The hours of operation, sorry, we're going to be doing this. The hours of operation that you state in your submittal, is it for the entire facility, including the playing fields, or is that the hours of operation that the indoor complex is going to be open? Because obviously what you've heard is a lot of folks saying, how late are the kids going to be playing? And
yeah. So I'll do my best.
Clarification on that, maybe.
Sure. So, again, the outdoor fields are not fall fields. My kids go to Spicer's. I've been there my whole life. It's not an October event. So the outdoor fields are like a May through September. They go back to school. They have school sports. So it's a May through, it's a summer activity. The hours are usually like, they're not during the week. There's no Monday through Thursday. Again, the outdoor would be empty for all that time. So you'd come on a Friday night, and you'd have Saturday tournaments, on 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. or Sunday 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So the outdoor fields would have a weekend use. The indoor fields would be the rest of the year, again, because we're in Michigan, so it's October to April. So the training facility is not used in the summer. Again, if you do use it, it would be like the off times when you aren't playing tournaments, like on a Monday through Friday, after school late afternoon till like 9 o'clock at night. In October, obviously that's the time they would use. October to April is when the indoor facility would be used, which again, there'd be no lights or outdoor activity going on during that time. So again, it's an either or. So from October to April, the traffic would just be the indoor, whatever amount of kids can be indoors. And so the ordinance requires to have, parking for both, but we're open on the indoors from October to April. Again, with Saturday and Sunday hours being indoors from 8 to 10 p.m., 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Does that help?
What's there's been considerable concern about the adjacent uses and how you plan to buffer, some of the concerns that were raised here.
Yeah, so...
Because it doesn't appear there's a lot of screening or plans.
Yeah, so not... with a fresh sheet of paper, the goal was to design a first-class facility, which, from lights to, any, like I said, if you took U of M's field and you put it on here, that's what one of these looks like. So in doing that, that's where we started. The intent, though, is to, as you know, it's heavily wooded, except closer to Old 23. So after hearing all the comments before and tonight, again, our goal would be to move it closer to Old 23 to keep all the trees and vegetation that we could possibly keep. So we would move it closer to Old 23. To keep all the buffering of the trees, and again, no one wants a giant fence in their backyard and a giant Great Wall of China down Old 23 or on their property isn't either. So the best thing we can do is leave the trees and the vegetation that's there. And so then our goal would be to not disturb as minimal as possible and move it closer to Old 23.
Dave, do we have a GIS photo that shows this site with all the vegetation on it, so that those in the...
We have the GIS photo, just so everybody's aware that I'm getting to right now. The GIS photos are typically taken before the foliage is on the trees. So I think these are usually... this one is probably March after the snow, but before the leaves have budded out. This is in 2010, so it's a little outdated now. We're actually getting new ones of these. But, so... To answer your question, yes, that is the aerial photo of the the 4 properties?
We did a tree survey also, so most of it's heavily wooded at the corner, and it's heavily wooded down from all the neighbors' property on the west-hand side, all the way down to the creek. And so our goal would be to be out close to the freeway. Yeah, you can see it there. So you can see it's heavily wooded down near their parcel on the west side, all the way down. And so again, if we could be as close to Old 23 as possible, that would be the best way, Joe, to keep things natural.
So you would be, you're proposing to move the fields or the
Yes.
parking lot, the building?
Everything. Move everything. Again, the intent is to be a good neighbor. The intent is not to, we centered it on the property because, again, we thought that would be the best. But again, I don't think anybody wants a giant fence. So again, the best solution would be to leave all the vegetation and move it as far as possible to the east, which would give up the future baseball field, which would help one of the other concerns.
Did you get your answer? Yeah, sure. Okay. I got one other question.
Sure.
The illumination that is planned on the outside.
Yes.
We have a couple areas that are examples of that in our own community already. We have the softball fields on M59 and Old 23, and then we also have the football stadium. I guess I'm just trying to get a clear understanding of, is the illumination going to be very similar to that type of illumination or something different directly?
No. So if there's lighting, it would be state-of-the-art lighting that would be all compliant with the night sky compliance. So they would all be low intensity, shining down, all the new technology, which would be similar to like Brighton High School and some of the other schools. Most of all the lights that you see, whether it's the gas station or whatever, are just old, and they shine in the skies. In most communities now, whether they're tall or not, require them to shine directly down and not have any night sky effect, which is the glow effect that the neighbors are talking about.
Mr. Johnson, I believe you mentioned that you have someone representing your lighting consultant.
I do, but I got a better answer for everybody. And again, I mean this sincerely to the audience. He lives here. The amount we put the lights in, and again, the Musco guy's here. The lights are not going to be an issue. We are not going to die on the vine on the lights. He wants a softball for the kids in the community. So if we have to give up lights to be good neighbors, I'm just going on record. It's not going to be a deal killer. We have the most expensive, most night sky, LED, coolest lights that money can buy that University of Michigan bought, and we were willing to do them to put them in the community to buy the nicest lights. But if the community doesn't want a softball field with lights on it, it's not going to be a deal killer, because the reason we're here is for the indoor facility, and part of the indoor facility complements the outdoor. They complement each other. It's not die on the vine outdoor. It's not a beer league softball. This is for his 16-year-old daughter. They aren't going to be out at night. So the very few times that it would cost someone to spend $500,000 on lights for those few times is not a deal breaker. So put me on record. My name is Kevin Johnson. It's not a deal breaker for the community. So I know it's the number one topic. We were trying to do the right thing, because if you were to build, and again, he's not here, so I can say this. It's one of the nicest softball complexes ever designed, and we don't have anything like it in the state of Michigan. So there's only a few facilities like this in the country that are this nice indoors, and no one buys 4 fields of University of Michigan turf with Musco lights. No one, except for maybe in Orlando, where the tournaments are at. So his intent was to buy the nicest for his own community. But if the community doesn't want that, it's not going to be an issue.
Well, do you have an idea what the hours are going to be? I mean, typically a tournament, is there a cutoff on the hours?
Well, like on a night like tonight, you would never need a light. So this is what I'm saying, the very few times you need it would be like late May, early June when it first gets started, and then August, early September. Again, so it's not a need. It's a necessity in building a first-class park, but it's not a need in the sense that it's worth dying over.
Well, and in addition, for the public's benefit, our lighting ordinance for the rest of the lighting on the site is not going to allow his lighting to creep beyond to the property line. Right. And they've produced a lighting plan in our packet. And I don't know the distance you are from the property line on the light creeping off the parking lot and the drive, but it's very large distance.
Yeah. So again, we want the public to know this is not going to be the issue.
While we're going through this here, there's a lot of question about traffic. So if you could help us understand the tournaments, how many there's going to be, the timing of the tournaments, is there overlap?
Sure.
So you have traffic coming and going at the same time? So maybe that'll help solve some of the traffic questions.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe just one addition to that, if I may. Are they elimination tournaments, so by the time you get to Sunday, are half the teams going anyway?
Yeah. Again, most of the tournaments would be like that. You usually have like a low round robin play, a pool play, and again, it's elimination. If you lose, you go home early. And so if you're lucky enough to be there Sunday, then you are. Again, the facility's not used simultaneously, so it's probably my kids calling me to wonder why I'm not home. Sorry about that. So they're not used very often, and they're not at the same time. So again, if they built, say, 2 fields, most of the time you'd have 15 kids per playing at a time on each team, and so that's 30, and so you might have a second team waiting. So we're thinking that you'd have, if you had all 4 fields, you'd have a peak of basically 110 people per field, coaches and players and family and everybody that you'd have. So again, in the peak indoor, you have about 100 people. So again, I think that the traffic, again, would only be on those few days. So again, it's not Monday through Friday traffic, because that's in the wintertime. It's just going to be indoors, and there's only a max of 100 people, so that's 40, 50 cars.
100 people, but not 100 cars.
Right, so that's what I was saying, 30, 40 cars.
Okay.
And so that's most of the year except for the summer months, and so then you're talking the summer months, the 3 days, which would be Friday night, and Saturday and Sunday. And so again, that's usually just exiting and entering, but not all day.
Do the games get, the tournament games, do they get staggered at all as far as the start time, so there's not the rush?
There's not a rush. They're just, again, so as your teams come, they come in the morning, but they usually don't stay all day. So, again, basically you have 30 to 50 cars exiting and entering in those times. It's not everybody all at once. Your team gets eliminated, you leave. You don't stay there all day. So it's not like church getting out where everybody leaves. So again, it's not a high impact on. It is an impact. I don't mean to say that at all. But we won't be parking on the side of the road like Spicer's, which I have to well time out just to come and get my fresh donuts when they're hot.
Should be a booster.
We will get into all the site plan issues in that here in a minute. We're just kind of talking about all these things that relate to the use and all that, and some of them are going to spill over into the site plan, this lighting.
Well, there's the next few paragraphs has some questions that I think.
And I guess I do have a question on the lighting, knowing that it's not cast in stone on your proposal. How tall are those towers? The light,
those are 70 on the softball field, so those are tall. The parking lot one, so they are tall. Which again, and I want to say that if they're short, like a soccer field, they shine sideways. So the taller they are, the farther they go down. So if you look at
yeah, that's pretty high.
Yeah, so they don't need to be that high. But if you want the light to shine down, you have to have them that high.
I mean, that's the whole thing. They're shining down as opposed to going sideways.
But you'll look up at them too.
Right.
So, from your deck.
You mentioned the concession stand. I see there's one on the outside. That's basically food sales?
I call it high school football. Volunteers, no cooking, just, chips and just, again, people are going to be there, chips and volunteers working, and chips and hot dogs and pop and potato chips.
All right. And then what type of sales are going to be on the inside?
Just stuff for the teams indoor. I'm sure there'll be some, team gloves or team stuff that they, obviously they have a club. It's like a club sport, like a soccer. So they'll have some indoor stuff that the clubs can buy, but nothing. It's not going to be a retail shop where, hey, I think I'll drive by today and buy some stuff. And it will only open when the.
What level of players are? I I mean, it's not like our HIA, it's not a youth organization.
No,
What
so-
level of
So
players do we have?
the team that they're currently, the turn-into team is a nationally ranked girls softball team. And so his daughter is a sophomore in high school. And so, they're trained by some of the best coaches. I know that, the U of M softball coaches called a few of the girls. They've offered to come help train. So the goal, again, is to have the University of Michigan college girls come train some of the younger girls and have it be a first-class training facility. But to put the outdoor turf on the indoor, to have a first-class facility, you have to spend the money to have the University of Michigan want to be involved in training the young girls. So, again, his team currently, again, if you wanted to do this, if it wasn't this would just be like the soccer fields up in Fenton, and, there's grass fields, and they throw them out there, let the kids run around, and these are, anybody that comes to play on these fields those will be top teams.
So where are these other teams going to be coming from?
Well, that's...
Immediate area?
Yeah, again,
Out of
well,
state?
we don't have very many good teams in the area. I mean, Grand Rapids, they'll come from, Novi, or, they'll come from Detroit Country Day type, Farmington, or other, Lansing. I think there's a facility in Grand Rapids. So, again, there just aren't that many travel girls softball. And so that's the problem, is there aren't that many teams, and so they need a place to play indoors. So really, the outdoor feeds the indoor, and vice versa.
Okay. You guys have any other questions on the use portion there? This one, first half of this letter for them? Not, I think what we could do is move on to the actual site plan review, and that's going to pick up some of these other things real quick, too. And that starts on page 8. And we will get most of the questions that came in probably this section of the review, and if we don't, we'll pick those up at the end. Probably can move right to page 9 and talk about the traffic. We kind of just hit it there in regards to requirements from Livingston County Road Commission. They looked at this and said what?
Yeah, we've submitted the location as far as site distance and all that. They've given us the approval on that. Basically, they've given us the approval for everything. They're currently reviewing the layout of the commercial driveway to make sure it's up to their standards. As far as as far as the amount of traffic and stuff, they were not concerned about that. They have the information. They've done, actually just did a recent traffic count, I believe, actually spring of this year was the last one. And basically, the amount of trips that we're predicting through there didn't even come close to touching, impacting the intersection or the road there at that point. So they said there's really no warrant to do a traffic study. We provided a trip generation report and stuff to them as far as what we anticipated based on the usage, and again, the time, we're not going to be hitting the peaks of the current. I mean, the current road obviously has the peaks during the morning and evening hours and stuff, and the times that we're going to be hitting those peaks, we won't be putting traffic on the road at that point. So.
Okay. Moving on down, lot dimensions, it looks like, you've got plenty of land there at 94.5 acres. Frontages certainly are meeting all the minimum frontages, and your setbacks are very generous. Any thoughts, Dave?
I think it's worth mentioning, I know some of the issues came up with the creek and the wetlands, if it's not already obvious. So the area of impact is all north of the Ore Creek, and maybe the applicant can speak a little bit more to the way they laid out the site relative to the regulated and non-regulated wetlands on the site. I don't think I'm putting words in their mouth when I say they've done their best to stay away from the MDEQ regulated wetlands, because that gets into a whole nother realm of seeking wetlands mitigation permits from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. So as far as the layout, you're essentially keeping it to this area north of the creek, and they're also not getting into this, what I've been calling the panhandle portion on the west side of the property.
And so we had a study actually done. We had a wetland study done so we could mark where it was before, property was ever acquired, to to make sure we would stay as far away from that as possible. And then the goal is to move it as close to the corner of Clyde and Old 23 as possible and work our way south to have as minimal disruption.
I could talk on the wetlands a little bit. Part of the package, there was a complete wetland delineation report put in there. There are regulated wetlands near the creek. We're staying completely out of those because, as Mr. Campbell mentioned, I mean, permitting through the DEQ is a nightmare, and really it's timing as far as what we're looking at. There are 3 small wetlands that are in the area that we're looking at. They are not regulated, they are not large enough, or are they close enough to the creek to be regulated by the DEQ. So there's really no, there's no, I guess, but basically we can impact them at that point because they're so small.
I just thought it was worth mentioning in the bigger realm of setbacks.
And to kind of go along with that, you're using a pretty good chunk of the only usable property that's there. So I think there's some questions about future use. There's really not much future use available, correct?
There's really not. It slopes off south, between there and the creek, it slopes off pretty heavily, so even though there's land there, I don't know that it's buildable.
And heavier trees and everything, tree coverage is back to the nuts there too, and that's obviously we're trying to stay away from that as much as possible.
In your
almost heavily treed.
Yeah, and in your grading plan for this project, you're clearing only what you need to clear.
Absolutely.
So for the, I can't recall the number of acres that you're using.
It's 20 some.
They're using 20 some of the 95 acres, so they're leaving 75 of them untouched.
Yes.
So what we do is we just need to make sure that the 25 that you're working with are the best 25 that makes everybody happy.
Correct.
Well, if you go back through the aerials and stuff.
There you go. There's a good shot. So there's a good shot showing the trees, and that's why I was saying the best land is really to the north and to the east. And so if we can stay as close to that, that's why I said before, our best solution is to really leave every vegetation that's there possible. And so if we could scooch it over, make an adjustment and scooch it over a little closer to the east, that will really benefit everybody.
Well, yeah, and in addition, for the future use, as you just said, the land drops off to the south and we have regulated wetlands, so as far as expansion, it's not going to happen.
And there's a chance that we may only put in 2 fields to start with. So again, I think our we're asking for 4, but there's a chance we will only put in 2, because again, the indoor is the important one for Michigan.
Another point to that too, about 20 years ago, that whole property was farmed back in the aerials. That was completely farmed with a fence row down the center.
You remember, huh?
I do.
All right. Okay, well, let's continue on, and we're on the building setbacks. For those that are interested to on the west side, the setback on the side yard on the west side is 15 feet. They're proposing 221 feet. So as you can see, they're kind of staying away, and if you're going to move anything further to the east, that number could potentially grow. So I just wanted to bring that point up. The accessory building setbacks, we're talking about dumpsters and concession stands. Well, the concession stand's in the middle of the site, so I don't think we're worried about too many setbacks there. Building height, looks like you're under the requirement. The top of the building, for your information, is 35 feet at its highest point. Accessory building height, what are we referring to, the concession stand again?
It's probably a non-issue. I can't imagine that the concession stands and the dugouts are going to get anywhere near the maximum building height. They don't actually, I believe, my recollection is they don't actually include a dimension of those structures, but I don't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Way low.
Like 8 feet, a dugout just thick enough to... Yeah.
Okay.
And the concession, same thing, you'd have 8 to 9 feet, just enough to get underneath and use the roof.
Okay, all righty. Site requirements, dumpster enclosure, just need to use the same building materials on your dumpster enclosure.
Correct.
So brick and...
We'll match the same profile.
It is. It is on the site plan, yeah. The off-street parking. Dave, what are you looking for on this off-street parking comment?
I may have gotten a lot of my answers, but maybe it's worth just one more confirmation. The concern that we had from parking, and believe me, it's never the intent of this planning department or this planning commission to overpark planet Earth and put more asphalt than we need to. We did want a little bit of clarification on the potential for overlap. If there's 4 games going on all 4 fields and full practices in the building, is there still sufficient parking for the use of both facilities if they're both at full capacity? But part of the answer to that question, I think, has been stated, which is either the indoor or the outdoor component would be exclusive from the other, is what I think I heard.
Yes, that's correct. And we've also, just for the township, we've shown a couple places for land banking, so not only have we said that with our actions, but, that we've set aside some so that that there's room there. Obviously, with 90 acres, there's room, but we've shown a couple places so that you could see that, again, so there wouldn't be spicers.
And we're looking at the fact that, with those 4 fields fully operational, we feel we need about 150 spaces or so. But as you mentioned, the overlap changing between fields, we've given an extra, we're showing 248, I believe is what we're showing.
And maybe that was another part of that discussion was, you brought up the analogy of church, and that's as good as one as any. So when you've got a 9 o'clock service and 11 o'clock service, and the 9 o'clock folks aren't leaving until 10:30, and meanwhile the 11 o'clock folks are coming in early, you've got that overlap. Right. So as far as the way the tournaments are set up, is there going to be an overlap in the games where the next group of competitors are coming in early? Meanwhile,
most of again, when they're all there, again, they're not coming and going. They're all there, and once the pool play is done and it's elimination, then they start to filter off one at a time. So they're not overlapping. Like, hey, here comes 8 teams and here comes 8 teams. They're either there or they're filtering off and in. It's not like a church where it's 500 people coming in and 500 coming out. They'd either all be there or they'd be trickling out.
I was looking for some clarification. I think I got it. Okay. So in general, I think we've determined that based on their calculations and their rationale, there's sufficient parking.
And we'll leave some extra spots on there for the site plan so that you guys, if there was ever a problem, we'd have space to put more in for your, we'd leave a land bank spot for you.
Maybe then there's a question for the engineer. Is the detention basin sized to take on that future parking if ever it's needed?
Yes, the detention basin is fully based on everything you see on the site plan plus the future areas there. I mean, that's both the pond and the pipes, the storm sewer going down to it. Obviously, we don't want to have to go back 5 years from now and increase the size of that. So.
I was going to say, and for the public's benefit, the future is this field here, and then what they're referring to on the parking is this. They're reserving this lawn space.
Then there's a couple.
And south too?
On either side.
Oh, right here. Right here. So if we run into parking issues and we have people parking on the lawn, parking on the road, we can come in and require them to add parking spaces, and they've already designated a spot for it. Or they feel they need it, they can come to us. Barrier-free parking, looks like you're fine on. Parking driveway, internal roads. Dave, you want to add your comment about the road running around the side of the building? And then is this appropriate time maybe to talk about the fire marshal's thought on a second entrance for emergency only?
Yes, so the fire marshal is recommending that the Planning Commission have a discussion with the applicant about the possibility of incorporating some sort of a secondary emergency access along Clyde Road, and it's up for discussion whether it would be a gated situation where it's only used for emergency or whether it would be a full access. The comments we've gotten from the Road Commission, who does have jurisdiction over Old US 23, they're satisfied that this driveway location, this driveway site distance, will adequately serve this facility to the point where they have evaluated whether or not there would need to be a northbound left turn lane and determined that it would not be required. So the Road Commission, who has jurisdiction over both Clyde and Old 23, is not requiring a second point of public access. So I think what the fire marshal is recommending, if not necessarily mandating, is consideration of an emergency access, and if so, incorporating it into this service drive that they're already proposing.
It could be gravel, it doesn't necessarily...
Yeah, that's acceptable, yeah. I've seen
With a gate.
Gate.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because we don't want people using it
Absolutely.
as an everyday thing.
No problem. We agree.
Now, maybe when we get to the architecture, we do want to come back to, because part of this conversation is the overhead door, and we should probably come back to that when we get to the architectural discussion.
Okay. All righty. Okay, so we're actually at the bottom of the page there, landscape and screening. I know there were comments about concerns with noise levels, removing existing vegetation, then there was concerns about vegetation removal and the home that is sitting there on the diagonal that's right there on the corner. Any thoughts to what we can do to improve that? Are you satisfied with your proposal, or can you better explain your proposal?
Yeah, so, John, just, you have your drawing, can I just see your drawing? So our thought was to move it over, do you have how far it would move over, John? No, I just wanted, we did look at it, and we'd move it all the way over, I just can't.
Yeah, 80 feet.
So we were talking about moving it over like 80 feet, the whole complex.
All of this, picking this whole thing up and pushing it to the freeway?
Yep, so that we'd leave another 80 feet of trees and vegetation, which we feel would be better than just planting wood fence or something.
Right.
We feel 80 feet of natural is better than something I can do artificially.
Well, yeah, because I just got done, I think you were at 220 already.
Right.
So now we're at 300 feet.
No, we're
the other way.
We're at
423.
Yeah, so yes, no, for you, 220, yeah, so it'd be 300,
It'd be
yes.
300 feet
Yes.
from the western property
Okay,
line.
yes, correct. So we're thinking about adding another 80 feet of natural back, not disturbing it.
Okay. Not familiar with the vegetation enough to know what's going on over there, because our
That's pretty
picture
healthy.
doesn't show...
There's trees on that side. There's
Northwest corner
Those
is very...
good trees, they're 20-year-old trees.
Right, well, it's an old farmstead up there.
Right, so we'd leave those trees that are kind of,
Locust.
yeah.
Basically, that whole area that we're showing the clearing and everything with the hatch.
Those would be the ones that get to stay, yeah.
So is it fair to say this dash line, which is indicating your area of impact, your area of removal, that line would effectively move approximately 80 feet further east?
Correct.
And it actually doesn't, what it does is it moves it far enough to the east that's outside of where we're showing that dense area being cleared there.
So that dense area would all stay.
And Dave, we don't have any GIS photos of trees with leaves on them.
The answer is no, and that's because when aerial photos are taken, the folks who do those purposefully do it before the foliage comes out, just because it gives you a better sense of what's on the ground. They did, within their submittal, they provided some perspective pictures that were taken. Maybe help me out when those
That was taken about a month ago, which is before the 4th of July.
and we can go to that. I mean, their intent was to show, if you're standing in this spot and you're looking in this direction, here's what you're going to see.
Actually, those are June 22nd or something like that.
It's, as someone who walked this site with Mr. Aslan, I can certainly confirm that it is very, very heavily vegetated to the point where it's you're going off road to get through there, and it's if we can, as they're proposing to preserve the amount of natural vegetation to the extent possible, including the possibility of shifting everything 80 feet further closer to the expressway to preserve another 80 feet worth of vegetation. That certainly sounds like a positive step toward protecting the neighboring residential properties.
Well, and I also heard them say they would consider eliminating the lights on the field.
Yes. Yes.
He even went on record to say that.
I did.
So now it's been said twice. Okay. Sue, did you have any landscaping comments overall with what you had seen?
Just kind of going through each category, that we've got like the green belt requirements. So I guess the question would be maybe at Clyde Road and Old 23 along that edge, it looks like you're pretty much clearing that area, and I don't know if you'll have enough vegetation to kind of meet our green belt requirements. On the west side, yeah, it sounds wonderful.
And on the east side, now that we're moving it, we would, again, on that front corner, we would look to leave every possible tree that we could. And if, again, we've done the foundation plantings, but if you thought there was some more trees needed based on how many we were going to take out, if there was any, we'd add some back in.
Yeah, there's a section in our ordinance that just explains, for the frontage and what's required on Old 23, just to make sure we meet that.
Okay.
Looked like the foundation landscaping, you were, ample on that.
Yeah.
The parking lot landscaping, there was some discussion in Dave's letter. I think you've got some really nice blow-ups in your parking lot, and I think one of the blow-up details shows those like 4 larger islands, and you've kind of spelled out in the center what the planting is, but kind of on the ends of the 4, it's not really pointed out.
That's where basically the regular trees were through there. In fact, that is realistic of what we're proposing. If you're talking as you move from the center, if you move east and west on that, those larger trees are basically what we're proposing.
Right. And is there vegetation like in the ground plane there, or?
No, we're going to beautify the corners to make a pretty like the intersection. So that's kind of why they're all 4 kind of, instead of like I call it like the school where they just do the whole boulevard, and they were leading that. I saw all, is to kind of do a prettier section where all 4 intersections come to kind of make a boulevard effect, like a downtown effect.
Right.
There, from both the intersection to the building, vertically to the field, and then there. So
then on this end where you've got your trees still,
so we put like trees and rock mulch and bark and stuff like that,
Okay.
It would be mulch. But
So we kind of talk about not to have a surplus of mulch kind of in our ordinance. We just have to look at how we could fill those, but be practical.
Okay.
So I think that was one thing that I think, Dave, you were kind of asking about doing your letter.
Yes.
Let's see here. The detention pond planting, I know there was a question about outletting to the creek and the whole bit about the detention pond. We do have a requirement for planting. It's kind of buried in the site, we know.
We'll do that.
Yeah, and I'll make the comment. First of all, can you explain to the audience whether you have a detention or a retention pond, because there is a difference, and what the difference is, so they understand that.
Okay. We are, a retention pond with an R keeps all the water in and the water perks into the ground. A detention pond keeps the water there, but then it gradually lets it outlet into a creek or into some type of an outlet there. We are proposing a detention pond strictly because that's where the water goes there and goes down. Everything does flow down there. Basically, the Drain Commission requires that you discharge at the current rate on that, and your ordinance speaks to that as well and has requirements to that. Basically, there's, if you look on the drawing, the part to the north is basically a filtering pond or a bioswale. That basically contains 5% or 10%, I can't remember, 10% of what's the first 10% of the water coming in. And so like on a normal storm, all that water is going to stay in there. You get to a 100-year storm, which is what the facility is designed for, it's going to flow over into the larger pond. But most of the time, it's going to stay in that first pond and slowly work its way out into the larger pond. And then it does have an outlet to the creek. That's basically where the water goes now, and so trying to basically maintain the current patterns as far as that goes. So. And as far as the landscaping, quite honestly, we just didn't get that done. We were still, when we got down to site plans in the middle, we were trying to get everything done. We got the pond size, and we got to turn it in. That's what it came down to.
We'll adhere to it. We'll fix it, and we'll adhere to your standard.
I think in the ordinance it talks about keeping it natural looking, so we're not looking for anything formal in it needs to fit this environment that we have here.
We can use natural grasses and things like that.
Yeah, rural.
And especially in the upper part, I mean, it's just a natural filter anyway at that point. That's what we're intending to do that.
I think the other part of that, to help the audience understand, is that the purpose of the swale in the pond is to filter the water so that it's clean when it gets back into the creek.
Yes.
So it's it.
And there's several people mentioned in there, as far as, using the AstroTurf and stuff like that, you're absolutely right. The amount of chemicals, there won't be any chemicals used on it, so that's...
So it's fair to say, for the benefit of the audience who asked about the detention pond, it's an engineered system that's designed by its nature to filter out the sediments and the other things that come off of a parking lot, so that by the time it finds its way back into the earth, it's
And at the same rate that goes now.
correct.
Yeah, basically there's an overflow, something plugs up or anything, but everything is designed to outlet at the same rate the water's getting there now. So, and it's, designed to the Livingston County standards as well as the requirements that you guys have in your ordinance as well. So.
Okay.
I just have some other minor,
Please
just
do.
clean up for later, just on your plant materials that you have listed in your plant list. Just look at those again, make sure the sizes meet the ordinance.
Okay.
And, just look at how you've also called out, like, an example would be your spruce trees. Look at kind of industry standards. You've got it called out like a canopy tree, but they'd be like by height. Just kind of clean that stuff up and check that. And just one comment, just on the landscape, I know you've got these planters and things to kind of break up, and the boulevard, that's all great. Just one place on the site plan is right this area there. It's a huge piece of concrete right there. If I measured it right, it's at least 50 feet wide and about 30 feet deep. So, it's like almost 1,200 square feet of concrete. Maybe you have it there for access, I don't know. Everything else you've got really nicely broken up.
The whole drive?
I'm just talking that whole concrete area there, just to consider, is there something, are people waiting for someone to pick them up? I don't know. I just know it's going to be a little brutal after all you've done so well else on your site, just a comment.
That's fine.
And the rest looks great to me.
Okay, any other questions on landscaping? Sidewalks?
It's a stretch, I recognize, but I think we at least want to confirm that this is not a development where we would be looking for them to provide frontage sidewalks along Clyde and or Old 23 in anticipation of a future non-motorized system through this area.
I vote no.
I would agree.
Okay. Thank you. We all there? No sidewalks.
Just for the clarification, other than the ones that they're
You
already
have to
offering
put it on there.
internal to the system.
Right, other than those internal to the system, no road frontage sidewalks, and it does have to go in the letter, and we have to offer our opinion. So, we did. Lighting, we talked a little bit about the lighting. All could change if things did change there. Just keep in mind the light levels that are permitted in the parking lots and along the building and that. And for the audience's benefit, their numbers are very low, the amount of light coming off this site.
Are the lights going to be, especially on the perimeter of the facility, are they going to be timed out at night?
Yeah, again, there won't be anybody there at night, so we'll make sure they're on a timer and a photometric, so they only come on, when they have to, and then go off at a certain hour. So just enough to get people out of the facility safely. And they'll just be LED, fully shielded, the new high-tech, real down, flat. I think most people have seen them in in new places. They're flat LED lights, and they just shine down.
20 feet, 25 feet?
Yeah, the pole lights.
I think they're 20 for the parking lot. I know your ordinance. I can't remember actually what they are. I apologize.
I think we have the section cut, Dave, ready to submit. Do you have it here?
This is I'm not sure if we did get that one turned in, but yeah.
I think we were struggling to find the height noted.
We'll verify, but it was done with photometric per your ordinance.
Okay. So if you just put that height on there, it'll be great. I know they're 25 on the building.
I know there's a lot of poles, because we couldn't get them very tall. I know that.
All right.
Lots of little ones.
That's all right. We don't want to look up and see them either. Okay, so we're on page 15. Boy, if the lighting comes off on the field, that's a That's a whole different game on that. So we're on water supply, disposal, you said well and septic. Don't know for sure where the septic's going, you'll figure that out. It's going to be somewhere over there.
Right.
And it has to be approved by Livingston County.
Correct, yeah. And it will be down in that area just because of the fact that we don't want to have to double pump. We don't want to have 2 pump stations. So
Right.
it'll be down even with the concession stands in place in there. So.
They may require an area of a secondary fields.
Absolutely, yeah.
All your walls and fencing, those, as Dave's noting, just customary with softball fields.
Yeah.
Outfield fences, backstops,
Absolutely.
all of them.
Yep, and they'd be black to blend
Yeah, that
in,
was
so they'd all be, just like they depicted on the renderings, they'd all be black to blend in as much as possible.
Okay. We're at the bottom, page 15. Architectural and building materials. Probably the biggest thing to talk about is the building itself. Anybody have any comments? They need a couple minor deviations from what we require, but I'm looking at that facility thinking that
It's nice.
it's
very nice.
It's
Very nice.
a beautiful building.
It's nicer than the golf dome that I built.
Yeah, I guess you could try that, couldn't you?
Sticks at it.
No, it is a beautiful facility. Your requirements or your requests on the minor deviations on percentages of materials, I find totally acceptable.
I agree. I was looking at that. I think it goes well with the...
So I wouldn't change anything. Okay, we're up to the other reviewing agencies. Any comments on DPW's review, engineers' review? We touched on the fire department's...
Well, the fire marshal was looking for some, he was not recommending approval based on, I assume he ran his turning template for his largest ladder truck through the parking lot and wasn't able to make it through. So I think we need to follow up with him and you can speak to that?
I got an email back from him yesterday morning because he had forgotten to attach the turning template that he used. So we have that now, and we'll address that.
So I wasn't copied on an email, so is it something on your end that you'd see as being something that can be resolved?
It's doable. Yeah. Okay. I think actually we're very close.
Okay.
We just need to modify that, and it's just widening up, making the turning radii a little bit larger.
Go ahead.
I just have one other comment. One of the other recommendations that I was making to the owner was to be neighborly is, again, because there isn't a huge business there, one of our suggestions for a minimal impact would be to phase the project in a first phase and a second phase. So we, ask for approval, but that we potentially would only put in 2 fields and half the parking. And again, as the need came back, then we'd come back and do that. But again, our goal would be to be good neighbors. And so that was one of my recommendations. That might be something that the neighbors we could offer tonight is, again, you're going to have to put it out there in order to invite a team or to have to build a facility to train. But because there aren't any training facilities this side of Grand Rapids, part of it is we don't need 240 spots on day one. So that might be one of the things that might be neighborly that we might be willing to do, is kind of do it in 2 fields and then, half the parking and then come back and do the other 2.
Have you thought about how you would do half the parking?
You just basically so you just would do the 2 fields to the north there, Dave, those 2 fields, yep, and then not do the 2 fields to the south, farthest away from the creek, and do the same thing. You'd keep the parking closest to the building, and potentially not do that. We've also looked today, John, you want to show it? John's got a drawing. We just did a concept, if nobody's mad, we got a concept of how we might move it over and raise everything to the north, including the parking, and put the future off to the side. So if you don't mind, we'll show you an idea.
I'm going back to Mr. Aslan's computer.
Yep.
Is it an idea you're going to advance? Is it something that we want to see or not?
No, you do. We do. No, it's...
everything's going pretty good right now.
No, we're just saying that we just want to be neighborly and just say, hey, as we go forward, we're saying that, conceptually, we could move the fields up, we could move in half the parking, and we're just kind of, again, wanted as a discussion point to say, look, we're trying to be good neighbors here, and we want to get as far north and east as possible. And so in doing that, we can get farther north and east with the softball fields if we put some of the parking off to the side that might be future. So that was just kind of just a neighborly discussion point, not trying to raise a whole nother subject, but I just wanted to just get your thoughts at least.
I don't see enough change there to be...
Well, no, there is actually. There is quite a bit, actually.
Well, I know there's a lot of change, but I mean, as far as conceptually...
I'm not, again, it was just if things were on flames, I just brought a backup car.
Oh, I see.
So we're just saying this would show, John, there are 300 and how feet? 386 instead of 221 for the neighbors. So we'd move it 160 feet.
Same building footprint.
Same everything. I mean, we're just cutting and pasting.
Same amount of parking.
Trying to save trees, trying to move it as far close, just cutting and pasting. We weren't really trying to redesign the whole
project?
No.
Yeah, because I just spent an hour with you, and...
No, we're just saying, we're just conceptually, we're just talking about moving it up, and so we just made phase 2 and 2. But the concept is to leave it the way it is, but move everything as close to the freeway.
Okay. Any other consultants' comments? Any other questions? There's a few that we need to get through from the audience, from our residents here yet, too.
Dave, was there something about the overhead door that you would like to bring up?
Yes, so this facility does, its main entrance does face in, and so then their overhead door, which I presume is so they can get the mowers in and out and whatever other, the gators and whatever kind of equipment they're going to use out there. But typically, in our zoning ordinance, it's stated that overhead doors are not supposed to face a front, and Clyde Road would be considered a front. Now, that's a possible deviation as part of the architectural waivers, but I think the Planning Commission would want to see some justification for such a deviation.
Can I do something like on that right now?
Yeah.
I'll be able to show you what it would look like with our landscaping as if you were...
Well, we can make it match. Again, our goal is that you wouldn't want to come in through the front door, and if you had to get something larger, you got to be able to get, there's the trees that are there.
It's worth acknowledging that standard, I believe, is more intended for, oil change places and quickie lubes and transmission shops and things like that.
It is.
But it's worth a discussion.
It is worth a discussion. The other point is, are those the trees at the height they are today, or is that 50 years after you plant them?
They're the trees that were in my swamp. Somewhere between those two.
Somewhere between, okay.
Well, actually, those trees probably top off and no more than 30-something.
The trees there are an hour taller than that.
Yeah, they are tall. Yeah. They are tall. And if you're leaving that Clyde Road stand of trees there, then it could be fairly representative of what we've got.
And like I said, there won't be any deliveries or anything like that. I mean, obviously, if you get a little, it'll come through the UPS through the front door. That's just in case if you have to get the softball nets in, or you have to get some field equipment, you have to get it in the back door. We've made a road just to get around the back.
Okay.
And again, we'll make it match the building materials and colors, and, we don't want it to be glass or stand out. We don't want it to, I think I have like a farm door style in my own house, like the ones across, but I don't think we want it to look like a farm door. So we'll make it blend in as much as possible and even camouflage it like the colors of the building as they go. We can make that.
If you look at this elevation, you can see that of the entire north elevation, I think what we're talking about is a relatively small area right here.
I would think the Planning Commission would take into account the scale of the building relative to the size of the overhead door.
And we can camouflage it, like I said, we can get it to match.
Yeah, just the appropriate color paint on it, and it'll go away.
Yep, correct.
Okay, we had a couple of questions out that we have not probably answered yet, and one of them is probably more of a Dave question than anything else. There were questions about the future use.
Yes.
So, no one wants this to ever go away, or maybe this is very successful. There's more land there they're not using. What can they do?
So, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to pull up the township zoning map, because I think for the benefit of the audience, we want to talk about two things. We want to talk about the property's current zoning, and then we also want to talk about the property's future land use designation. So if I can have 1 minute, I'm going to pull up two separate maps.
I got my elephants.
yours.
It's the good side of the elephant.
Nice daughter's painting. It's very nice.
This rear will put in the overhead door.
She went to Michigan State.
Hey.
It's easier to draw elephants from behind than just from front.
Good point.
So first we'll look at the zoning designation for this property. And as we mentioned at the very beginning, there's 4 properties combined here. This little corner of general commercial right up at the freeway ramps. Conservation agriculture, conservation agriculture, conservation agriculture, and obviously the creek cutting across it toward the south. This proposal, this facility, a private recreation area, is permitted as a special land use in the current zoning district, conservation agriculture. When we say a special land use, that means we have to have a public hearing. That's what we're having tonight. Letters in the mailboxes, notice in the newspaper. The applicant is not seeking a rezoning for this property because a rezoning would not be necessary for the proposal that's before this planning commission. The future land use designation, which this is the future land use map that Hartland Township adopted in 2011. For the record, we are considering adopting a new future land use map very soon, and it's actually one of the agenda items coming up later in the meeting. But what's not going to change is the future land use designation for this property, which is this purple color, which is the same purple color that you'll see on all 4 corners of the Clyde Road and US 23 interchange. And what that purple designation is planned industrial research and development. So what that means is the township's vision of this 4 corners area, the 20-year vision that we try to encompass in our future land use plan and our future land use map, is something in the realm of planned industrial research and development. So the possibilities with that are pretty broad, but we can all picture the things that we see at freeway interchanges that kind of fit into that category: the office parks, the tech parks, the medical parks, a hospital perhaps. We don't know, nothing's in front of us yet, but the township, when we develop this future land use map, we have to take into account freeway accessibility, freeway visibility, and the fact that there is sewer available to these properties. And those components make this very, very desirable real estate for some sort of a large-scale employment-based, like I say, such as a medical park, a satellite university campus, something in those realms. So, when the question is what could possibly be done in the future on the applicant's properties, the answer is anything that could be conceived that would fit into this category of planned industrial research and development. To do a lot of those things I just mentioned, a tech park, an office park, the applicant would likely have to seek a rezoning from something other than conservation agriculture, or most likely they would go for what is called a planned development, which is a rezoning conditional upon, yes, Hartland Township will rezone this property if the applicant builds this. That is all conceivable for not only the applicant's property, but for the other 3 corners of this 4 corners area. So in a very roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of possibilities for what could conceivably be developed on this property and on the properties kitty corner in every direction at the Clyde Road interchange. So we hope the softball fields, if they get approved and if they get constructed, are successful and thrive and can be there for a long time. But it has to be stated, just like at every other corner of this interchange, it could be something in the realm of that planned industrial research and development spectrum.
But to add to that, it could be that first. If the softball fields didn't go, somebody could buy that parcel and come and request that rezoning.
They could, and pick a use, some sort of a distribution center, for example. If the applicant, if a buyer wanted to buy this corner and do something like that, they would come to Hartland Township. They'd likely have to seek a rezoning to general industrial or a light industrial zoning district. that rezoning request would be considered relative to this future land use category. The first criteria when the township, the planning commission, and the township board look at a rezoning request is it consistent with the township's future land use plan? And in this case, if someone were seeking a rezoning to an industrial district, they would meet that criteria. And maybe part of the answer to the question of what could be done on this property, I may bounce to the applicant and their representatives to see, are there possibilities for expansion if their use is successful? And if so, what procedure might they have to go through to do that expansion? If this is a successful facility and they want to build 4 more fields, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they would have to come back to this planning commission and amend their special land use permit. And we'd all be right back here having the same process, having these folks the same letters in their mailboxes. Okay. Somewhere in there, I hope, was the answer of what could be the future of this property. I can give it a better shot if I didn't get it the first time. I think I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I'll do it anyway. I don't think they have any near-term plans to develop into the areas that they're not already showing.
Well, and a lot of it they can't to the south.
Well,
I mean, they couldn't do anything if they wanted to.
With the wetlands?
With the wetlands.
Well,
I mean, they could.
With enough engineering, I suppose anything's possible.
And permits.
What's that?
Permits.
I think there's only one small usable piece down at the low road down there.
Townley.
Townley. I think that's wouldn't be concurrent.
Yeah. There's a lot more vacant land that would be cheaper to develop than trying to get a wetlands permit. The only other question, but I think you kind of answered it, there were some concerns about, well, we're removing existing vegetation, increasing freeway noise sound, but if we shift the project to the east, I think we're leaving more.
Yeah, actually 100 and some. 80 might be an understatement, so.
So what might be interesting is when we see this come back, of course, we'll see it laid with the existing vegetation on it, and we'll see just how much is left.
And I think it's worth saying that if someone were to buy this property strictly for agriculture, they would be well within their rights to plow under everything that's grown up there over the last 20-plus years since it was last used and turned it into a soybean field, and all that vegetation would be removed for that purpose, and they wouldn't. It's already zoned for that. That could happen.
Well, they wouldn't be coming here for that.
Right. That's my point. I mean, this could go right back to agriculture.
They could clear cut it tomorrow.
For sure.
I think we got it. Any other questions or comments?
There was one about perimeter delineations. They were concerned about people wandering. Are you going to put signs up, or, I mean, what?
No, again, the only, it's pretty heavily wooded down the panhandle, so I don't think you're not getting in the panhandle, and you're probably not getting across the creek. The only thing they've talked about is, he said, well, if his wife comes, she'd like to wander down by the creek and, have a little walking area like they do down by Majestic at the golf course. So again, I get bored sitting there too long too. So again, I don't think there's any wandering more than any casual. Again, I don't think you're going to walk miles. And again, besides my son, who's 12, I think he likes to play down by the frogs.
Anything else? Any other questions? As Dave has recommended, no action, just take this information this evening and decide what you'd like to do.
And given the scale of the changes that they're offering to make, we're talking a significant shift of everything, and so obviously we'd want to see that shift come back and take another look at it and consider it at that point.
I have one more question. I see you had a nice-looking dugout, and you had some bleachers. What are you doing for seating in the dugout?
There'd have to be one little seat in there for the girls. Obviously, you'd have to have a little wood bench or something like that. The goal was to just make it out of brick and natural cedar and just have it be, wood.
It's quite a fancy...
Like I said, it's very... I've known the guy a long time. I built 3 really nice facilities like this, nothing like this for athletic, and everyone has been built for their daughter. So I just got to say that, a lot of this investment for the community is because he loves being here, and he has a daughter with a soft heart.
Well,
this is not I know this because I know the math, it's not a moneymaker. It's a daughter.
I'm glad I have 2 sons.
Yeah.
I won't disappoint.
Because you'd have a hard time paying for that building. I do a lot of industrial work, in Fenton and a lot of places. A manufacturing facility would have a hard time making the rent on the building alone.
I will say I like the architecture. I think it's one of the nicest facilities I've seen come through of that size.
I would have to agree. So let's see if we can get all these things taken care of and come up with something that still works.
Would you say it's fair to say that the waivers that they were seeking this evening are ones that this planning commission sees as being favorable?
I think if they get through everything, that's the easy part. Okay. For me. Their request for the architectural waivers are very minimal.
Right.
And I think those were all designed to be a guideline. If someone can creatively create an attractive-looking facility, you can't quite get there.
We're trying to achieve...
That's okay.
We're trying to achieve the intent behind it, not the strict application.
Okay. Anything else? Well, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing some updates from you.
The neighbors coming out, too. I do appreciate the neighbors coming out.
Well, and yeah, we're all invested in it, and for their benefit, this isn't done yet. They do have some work to do. It did go through fairly smoothly with the comments. I would say keep an eye on the township's website, hartlandtwp.com, and you'll see the board and the planning commission agendas posted there. You also could go there this evening if you wanted, or tomorrow click on there and you'll find that our complete packet, all the information that we have is on there. You can read everything we've seen and take a look at all the drawings you'd like to see also.
Dave, I'll try to get you an electronic copy for all the neighbors on that, so you can post on the website of these renderings. I got an electronic copy I can get you.
That'd be great.
So keep an eye on that, and some of these projects come back in a month, and some of them come back in 6 months, and some of them come back 2 years, and some of them never return. So
we got to
keep an eye on that.
The softball season starts in the spring, and the indoor starts in the winter. So we'll be back soon.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You have another opportunity to ask questions.
You can call to the public if you don't mind, because we've still got some other agenda items that we need to get through, but if you want to bring them up at that time?
Tonight?
If you like.
Well, no.
You're welcome to do that, too.
I'd like to write a full letter today.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Dave, everyone, we'll move on to item 8A, resolution recommending approval of the 2015 amendment to the Hartland Township Comprehensive Plan. And I'd like to turn this over to Dave again.
So the Planning Commission has been working on this update to the comprehensive plan for the better part of a year, and on July 16th, the Planning Commission had their state-mandated public hearing for the proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan. Some good public comment was received at that public hearing 2 weeks ago. The Planning Department has offered to the Planning Commission one relatively minor change, essentially a correction, based on the comments that were received at that public hearing. And so if the Planning Commission so chooses, and if they can accept that change that the Planning Department is suggesting, what the Planning Commission has in front of them this evening is the opportunity to approve a resolution recommending that the Township Board approve the 2015 amendment to the Hartland Township Comprehensive Plan. As the Planning Commission is well aware, because they've been working very hard on this for the last year, but for the benefit of the audience, what this amendment to the comprehensive plan will be an update to our future land use plan and an update to our future land use map, which is now hiding behind one of the softball complex's easels back there. Thank you, Mr. Hartland. The Planning Commission is recommending the board approve some redesignation of some properties within the future land use map, particularly some properties on the north side of Dunham Road between Clark Road and Bullard, and a large piece of property at the southwest corner of Old 23 and Bergen. The property at Old 23 and Bergen is proposed to be redesignated from Planned Industrial Research and Development to a medium urban density residential designation. And the properties along the north side of Dunham between Clark and Bullard Road are also proposed to go from a very low-density, single-family residential designation to a medium urban density residential designation. The basis for this recommendation of the Planning Commission is to accommodate the housing demands that Hartland Township currently has. The township invested in a housing market analysis to determine what sort of housing is Hartland Township currently lacking, and what came back confirmed the anecdotal evidence, which is that Hartland Township is underserved by the starter home market, but also the home market for the 55 and older crowd who is looking to downsize to a smaller place, still stay in the area, still stay near their family that is still in Hartland, but the folks who aren't looking to live on a large lot and cut the grass and fix the roof and paint the shutters and all the things that we don't want to do ever, but certainly once we get to a certain age. So to accommodate that market, we're proposing, this Planning Commission is proposing to redesignate some properties to accommodate a little bit denser single-family residential. This would not mean that a development that's consistent with that vision would be right around the corner. An applicant would have to come forth and seek most likely a rezoning on these properties as a condition of that approval. But what the township is trying to do is accommodate the housing demands that we know exist based on the analysis that we invested in. So if the Planning Commission so chooses, they have the option this evening to approve a resolution formally recommending that the Hartland Township Board adopt this proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan. And this is effectively the culmination on the Planning Commission's part of the better part of a year worth of some pretty diligent work.
I'll move Planning Commission Resolution Number PC15-01, recommending approval of application number 359, an amendment to the Hartland Township Comprehensive Plan.
Second that.
Okay, quick question for you, Dave. We don't do these very often. Do we do a roll call vote on a resolution? I know the board does.
I think it's worthwhile.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. And Keith, would you call the roll here of the...
Okay, Mr. Fox?
Yay. Yes.
Okay. I'm a yes. Joe Kalani?
Yes.
Sue Grissom?
Yes.
Okay.
Resolution passed.
Passes?
It passes. Okay, very good. Thank you. Dave, is that all we need to do with that this evening?
If you do, I will need to follow up with Chair Fox and Secretary Voigt with a paper version of this resolution once we plug in who made the motion and who seconded it, and you will put your signatures on that, and that will be included when we forward this on to the Township Board for their consideration of formally adopting this amendment.
All right, very good. Thank you. Next up, item 8B, site plan number 530-P, Walnut Ridge Estates discussion. Well, good evening, guys. Why do you always end up last on the agenda? Have you wondered that?
Last time it was their request.
Oh, it was your request last time.
Yeah.
You're learning a lot about Hartland, aren't you?
Right? Yes, we are.
All right, Dave, why don't you take this one for us?
So this applicant came in front of the Planning Commission a few times because the process they're going through is the Township's plan development process, which requires a minimum of 3 meetings in front of the Planning Commission and a minimum of 3 meetings in front of the Township Board. Those 3 steps are the concept plan, the preliminary plan, and the final plan. This applicant's concept plan came before the Planning Commission and came before the board. Both bodies found it to be a generally acceptable plan that they wanted to see move forward and get into the nitty-gritty engineering and so forth. So when the applicant moved on to the preliminary site plan of the plan development process, came before this Planning Commission on June 25th. Planning Commission had a lot of good discussion at that meeting. And subsequent to that June 25th Planning Commission meeting, the applicant, his representatives, some adjoining property owners, a group of folks who have a stake in this development had an opportunity to meet here at Township Hall. That was on July 15th, and I'd like to think it was a very productive meeting. I think we managed to get a lot of things figured out with how this development could be well integrated with the other developable properties in close proximity to it. And I'll get to what this development proposal is in just a minute, because I know the folks in the audience probably aren't familiar. But what we wanted to do tonight is have an opportunity to have a discussion with the Planning Commission to go over what the applicant is proposing as far as a solution of integrating his development with the possible developments adjacent to it, so that if we can get some consensus among the Planning Commission, some buy-in, then the applicant and his engineer can go forth and do the engineering and revise their plans and revise their development agreement and bring it back to this Planning Commission hopefully soon, so that this procedure can progress. It can get through the Planning Commission and then to the Township Board. And what the proposal is for a site condominium on the undeveloped property north of the new Venture Church. So the Venture Church property is 80 acres. The church building itself and its parking lot encompasses 25-30 of those acres. And so what the applicant, Mr. Lansing of Capital Construction Group, hopes to do is buy the remaining property from the Venture Church, or the majority of it, and develop 65 single-family site condominium units. These would be some quality homes, side entry garages, some nice building materials. We've seen a lot of the applicants' renderings of floor plans and possible exterior designs. We've been through this site plan in a lot of detail, both at the concept stage and at the preliminary stage. But what was the point of discussion, or a lot of the discussion on June 25th, was the possibility of extending the water and sewer that the applicant is going to run through this development by way of the water and sewer extensions that already go into the church building, and run it to the west property line where we know there to be developable property and a high probability of residential development of developable property on the east side of Hacker Road. What the township was seeking is a fair and equitable solution for all the parties involved to get the water and the sewer extended to this west property line, which was an obligation of the church when they built the church. So what the church is looking to partner with Mr. Lansing on is, rather than running the water and sewer along the M59 right-of-way, everyone seems to be in agreement that it makes more sense to run it along this west property line where we know there to be developable property on the east side of Hacker Road. And the applicant is also offering to provide an easement for the possibility of a future road connection. So if and when this property develops, both properties would benefit from having a road connecting the two of them. In the meantime, and I think Mr. Lansing's representative, Mr. Levanway, will explain this probably better than I can, until we know what the fate of these properties to the west are, the Walnut Ridge Estates development would have to have a secondary emergency access from the back of the church parking lot. That's a requirement both of the township zoning ordinance and of the fire code, that there needs to be a secondary point of access. So what this would be a gated emergency access from the back of the church in this development, and their main point of access would be the road stub that already exists along the east side of the Venture Church property to service these 65 homes that Mr. Lansing proposes to build. Part of this discussion tonight has to do with how Mr. Lansing is seeking to phase this development and also amend the development agreement of the Venture Church to kind of memorialize all these concepts that we want to accomplish. When does it get done? How does it get done? What is the timing of it? Whose obligation is it? And so we want to have that discussion with the Planning Commission so that Mr. Lansing and his representatives can go back and do their work on their site plan and do their work on their development agreement to get this all right, so that they come back to the Planning Commission, come back to the Township Board, and keep this project progressing. And I think I speak for the Township when I say this is a project that we want to see proceed. We think this is a quality development. We think this is a good fit on this property. This is a development that's very similar to a development that was already approved about 10 years ago, and then due to the economy never happened. So it's no surprise to anyone that someone wants to build single-family homes on this property. So we think this is a project that should proceed. And with that, I may turn it over to Mr. Lansing and Mr. Levanway to speak a little bit more to the narrative they provided, the written narrative they provided of how they would propose to make this all happen.
Thank you. So, as Dave mentioned, really two primary issues at our discussion in June, the utility extension and then the road access. And that has to do with the properties that are west of this property that front on Hacker Road. And so our proposal, which we've outlined in the letter to the Planning Commission dated July 21st, talks about several of these items and what we plan to do. If you could put the layout up. Thanks. Thanks, Dave. So what we plan to do is extend utilities, public sewer, public water in this location, and this will remain 90 feet wide, and it will be utilized for both the utility extension and a potential future road connection. And the intent is, with keeping it 90 feet wide, if this property to the west never develops or develops in such a fashion that they don't need to utilize or desire to utilize the access, this would become a lot in the future. And the existing, or I shouldn't say the existing, the initial emergency access through the center drive of the church would remain there in perpetuity. Should the property to the west develop, the access road is constructed there, then that becomes our second means of ingress-egress for the development. This, which is 90 feet wide, then would become a lot at that point. So it's basically a contingency plan. We know initially we'll be constructing our primary entrance here and also the emergency ingress-egress right here. And I'm not sure if the Planning Commission happened to notice on the plan that we had resubmitted, but we've adjusted our phasing, and we're proposing the initial phase being about the first 22 lots on the south portion of the property, which will allow us to extend the utilities initially over to this location. We likely will complete this loop in some fashion. It may be constructed of gravel or it may be paved. We're not sure yet. And we're now talking about 3 phases, looking at 3 phases with the south, the middle, and then the north. So we believe the proposal now for discussion with the Planning Commission does meet the expectations of the Planning Commission. But again, before preparing or revising our entire set of plans, we felt it best to come back and informally discuss with you this evening.
Any comments from anyone?
I'll throw a couple out there. It's worth noting that if and when one of these becomes a buildable lot, that would then be a grand total of 65 units in the development, which is one additional to the 64 that had been that's come before this Planning Commission before. And I don't think that's unreasonable, considering that both of those future lots would potentially be in limbo until such time as there's a clearer picture of what happens to the west. So Mr. Lansing would still be getting the 64 lots that he has been seeking. It's worth noting that while Mr. Lansing is offering to provide the water and the sewer extensions all the way to the west of the property line and provide the easement, What's not being offered, and I don't know it to be unreasonable either, is he's not actually offering to construct the road stub, because it's very possible, as Mr. Levanway mentioned, that these properties to the west may never develop such that they need a road connection, or it may not happen for a very long time. And I think this is a very good option, is knowing that there is an option for a road connection if and when we know what happens to the west, but in the meantime, not building a road connection that could very well never get taken advantage of.
Well, it could be ripped out if it went in right now.
Right, and I think we can agree that would be a shame if that had to happen, so.
Right. I was involved in the meeting that we had. I would have to say that I personally feel it's pretty fair and equitable arrangement and the trade-offs on both sides, well, three sides, the property owner to the west, Mr. Lansing, and the township. I feel this is a pretty workable scenario from my personal point of view.
Yeah, I agree. I was at the same meeting, and I thought it was a great compromise, and timing-wise, I could see when Mr. Lansing really had a rough time, kind of in limbo himself, trying to determine what to do with the property. You know, he can't wait around for the next developer, and he wants to get started, and I thought it was a great solution.
One of the things that did come up in that meeting, and it may be worth touching on here, is these proposed lots 39 and 12 would be considered corner lots even if this is just an easement, and therefore would have to have two frontages. And I think one of the things that was discussed as a possibility, and maybe you gentlemen want to speak to whether that's something you would be seeking, is not having to meet, on those two particular lots, not having to meet the two front setback requirements, given that there is some ambiguity of what may happen with it. That's not something that the township has not looked at before, particularly within the cobblestone development. The township allowed that on corner lots to not have to meet the frontage requirements along both fronts. And it seems to make sense here to not encumber the buildability, if that's a word, of those two units for a road easement that may or may not ever turn into a road connection.
I would say put it on the print the way you want it.
Right, and our thought is, again, this would be 90 feet wide. The typical road right-of-way obviously is 66, so this is an extra wide area to begin with, so we would probably seek that relief.
Yeah. Well, yes, you're right. If the road goes in, it's going to look like it's set back anyways.
Right, exactly.
Any comments on it? Support from...
I support the program.
The program?
I do too.
Yeah.
Great.
I really appreciate the efforts that went into it, and glad we got there.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
If we can assume, for the sake of discussion, that there will be a road connection, is it your intent to grade lots 39, 12, and the area in between, such that if and when that road has to come in, the impact of the construction of it is relatively minimal, that it's not a huge engineering undertaking?
We would grade it sufficient that there would not be significant impact to the adjacent owners, certainly.
Yeah, and you'd want it to be, because you'd want it to look like a lot. I would think your whole grading through the area would be what it's going to be.
Now, because that is a woodlot, as it extends to the west, we would we wouldn't plan to extend at the property line because of the woods and the community path that's going to go through there. But we would, again, we'll make sure there's sufficient grading that we would not impact the assumed homeowners on those lots.
And on your end, Mr. Lansing, how would you see marketing this to your future buyers, just so there's no surprises as far as if I'm looking at buying a house on either 39 or 12, is there a good way to disclose that just so everybody's aware this could someday be a road connection?
Absolutely. You just have to really be upfront with that, and definitely everybody in the community needs to be well aware of that.
I think
that'll be very prevalent in the marketing, especially in the condo docs as well.
Okay.
So that when we review the condo docs, because we'll review the condo docs.
Excuse me?
We'll review the condo docs.
Anything else? I'd like to thank you again for all the work you did on it, and look forward to seeing you back here real soon.
Okay.
Not last on the agenda next
Yeah.
night, all right?
Hopefully not, right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we do have a second call to the public, and I do think the guys in the hallway wanted to say something, or ask. Maybe not. Well,
I don't know, I thought he was going to...
he's out there talking to him right now. Maybe he's getting the answers that he would like. Let's move on to 10, planners report.
I don't have a huge amount of things. The Planning Commission's tablets, I know I brought this up last time, so how this works, I've discovered, is you all should be getting an email from Microsoft saying, here's your serial number, or your login code, or your unique name, so that you can download and install Microsoft Office. I haven't done it yet. I meant to do it today and ran out of time, so I'll be the guinea pig to see just how easy it is. If it's easy, I'll tell you guys it's really not that tough. Go ahead and give it a shot. If we don't feel like we're tech savvy enough to do it, bring your tablets back in and we'll get it installed on there. Speedway will be on the Planning Commission's, the Speedway's revised submittal will be on the Planning Commission's agenda for August 13th. Because I'm going to be out next week, we are either going to get those agenda packets to you very early or possibly a little bit late, and I'll let you know what that is. It depends on what we can get done between now and when I go on vacation. And as far as any of you are concerned, I'm going far away from any cell phone reception or any access to email.
Wait a minute, you can't vacation is affecting our schedule? If it is, I don't remember approving it. I think we should. Do I have a motion on the floor?
So I have a very capable staff that will be more than able to take care of everything for the week that I am gone. But we will be seeing a revised Speedway submittal on the 13th, and from what I've seen of it so far, they have very much tried to address all the issues that this Planning Commission brought up when they were in front of us on June 25th, which is probably a testament to how much gas they sell in Hartland Township and how bad they want to expand on their operation.
Awesome.
That's the gist of my planner report.
Good deal. 11, committee reports, comments, anyone? Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Good night, and thank you.